Today on Sports Inclusive, Ken Reid, Maritimer, best-selling author, and Rogers Sportsnet broadcaster. So first of all, Ken, welcome to Sports Inclusive. It's an honor to have you on the show. Obviously, very, very difficult times right now, and a lot of uncertainty. And first of all, thanks for coming on. But how are you, and how are your family?
Thanks, Craig. It's wicked to be here. We're good. We're just on lockdown like everybody else, so I'm sitting here in my house. I just was a little late getting on your call. I was outside playing road hockey with my boys, so we're doing as good as can be. Yeah, it's important to get the young guys outside. I think for us older folks, it's okay. It's not an ideal situation, but I think for young kids, it's a challenge. I got a 7-year-old, and he's a hockey nut, so he's running around the house all the time. And my 5-year-old, he's pretty chill, so he's in heaven. So the challenge is the 7-year-old, but we're doing as good as can be. And if all we have to do is sit inside for a couple of weeks, maybe a month or more, I think we can handle that.
You've been very active on social media with one of your amazing hobbies, sports cards and collecting. When was the first time that you opened a pack and that you knew that you were going to get into the collecting and especially hockey cards?
I'm guessing the first time I opened a pack, I was probably around, I guess, 1979, 1980, because I do have a memory of what I called the blue cards, which of course was the Gretzky rookie. And I do have vivid memories of being at my grandfather's house, and there was a little store down the road, down Union Street in Pictou. It was called Mr. Frazier's. So my grandfather gave me a quarter, and I'd go down and I'd buy a pack of hockey cards or baseball cards, of course, depending on whether it was summer or winter. And I have vivid memories of that as a kid. And, I collected as a kid just like anybody else, right? You got them, and I used to throw them in my old Dow 301 skate box, right? I wore the Dow 301s for Gretzky. And I'd throw them in there. And then a few years later, probably when I was around 11, I think, my mom brought a price guide home from Florida, from spring training in Florida. And that's when I realized baseball cards were worth money, and hockey cards obviously were too. So it was before the so-called boom of 89, 90, 91 happened. And I got into it pretty serious. In fact, there's a binder under this bed in my spare room right now. Here, I'll show it to you because I can reach it. And it's got the old business card for my brother on it, Ken and Peter, baseball cards and collectibles. And I guess you know
Wow.
my old address number if you look at it close enough. So I used to set up at shows and sell cards when I was, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. And when you're a kid walking out of a show with $500 or $1,000 just from selling your doubles, that's pretty cool. So, like most people, I discovered, most men, or guys, I guess, I discovered girls when I went to college and high school. So I kind of got out of it for a little while. But now that I'm an old guy, I'm back into it. And Craig, I know a lot of guys our age are kind of filtering back into the hobby. So it's just a nice way to stay in touch with your, for a lot of us to stay in touch with the game we love. I know behind you there, you got a bunch of Boston Bruins autographs. So it's the same kind of deal, I think.
Definitely. Ken, who was a big mentor for you with regards to sport, and who did you look up to growing up in the Maritimes?
Well, for me, my hockey heroes were the Wayne Gretzky's, the Guy Lafleurs. And then there were the guys I saw in my local rink on a Saturday night. I used to go to a lot of junior C games. So there was a guy named Dana Teapot Johnson. I looked up to T, and Pizza Turner and Bruce Hebert, guys like that. Wayne Woodacre was a hockey coach. He had a tryout with the Hartford Whalers, so guys like that. As far as broadcasting went, I was a massive Bob Cole fan. I'm still a massive Bob Cole fan. I love Bob Cole's play-by-play because he takes you into the game. He and Danny Galvin take you into the game. They don't bore you with stats. They're not necessarily telling you stories or what they know about the player, but they're bringing you into the game with the action, and I love that about Bob Cole, so I looked up to Bob. And then when I was a kid, around 17, 18 years old, I worked selling goalie equipment and hockey cards for a guy named Sandy Mackay, and he was a huge help to me. Just gave me a lot of confidence as a kid. And as I got the kingpin Ernie McCracken hair going here from not having a haircut maybe just because of this. Sandy Mackay helped me a lot, and he was a nice mentor for me when I was a kid. And then When I got into the business, guys like Doug Mason, who worked at MITV, Kurt Studley, who worked at A Channel Calgary, Tom Negavan, who worked at A Channel Calgary, Rob Gibson at A Channel Calgary. A lot of guys helped me along the way. And I know I'm leaving out names, and I don't mean to.
When did you know that broadcasting and sports broadcasting was going to be your passion?
Mhm. Early on, I loved hockey and baseball, loved it. But I remember being around maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9, and I made the novice 2 team in Pictou instead of the novice 1 team, and that was devastating for me. I was bummed out because until that point in my life, I thought I was going to play in the NHL. I mean, that was my only career option, I thought. And I was smart enough at that age to have the foresight to go, oh my goodness, I'm not going to play in the NHL. What am I going to do? And I remember talking about that with my dad, and a game was on. He said, well, why don't you be one of those guys that talks about the game? They get to go for free. And I don't know if a light went on with my head or not. But from then on, I wanted to be a hockey announcer or a baseball announcer. And I remember times going, maybe I should be a physiotherapist because my dad was a doctor, but it would always come back to I want to be a broadcaster. So it was a great thing to know what you wanted to do. For my parents, I'm sure it was a great thing that they knew their son wasn't confused about what he wanted to do. However, I caused them a lot of nightmares because my high school grades were bad because I didn't care about science. I didn't care about. I knew I had to do decent in English, and history was storytelling, and that's what I do for a living. But man, I had some pretty bad grades, so I drove my dad nuts there for a little bit. He's the town doctor, right? So the teachers would be going, "What's wrong with your son? You know, like, you're a doctor. You're supposed to be smart." You gotta be like, "Yeah, it just he's smart. He just doesn't care." And that was kind of it. I just didn't care.
Ron McLean talks about Maritimers and their ability to tell stories. And that's what really sets Ron and so many other great broadcasters aside. Do you feel that way, Ken?
Absolutely. We know how to spin a tale. Craig, a good buddy of mine's Terry Ryan, great storyteller. Bob Cole, great storyteller. That's what Bob Cole does when he does play-by-play. He's telling you a story as it happens in front of him. He's a great storyteller. My brother always says, people come up to him and they'll say to my brother, he's a comedian, they'll say, "Man, you're funny." But he'll say, "Yeah, where I'm from, everybody's funny, though." And I mean, there's just something about sitting around, whether you're drinking a bottle of Big 8 or drinking a bottle of something else, and just telling stories. It's fun. Maybe it comes from the isolation our ancestors came from at some point, and not being part of the big city. But yeah, we can tell a story. And my dad's a great storyteller. He's a funny guy. My mom's a great storyteller. She's a funny lady. So I think it's just something that's in the blood.
How important is it that Maritimers are having such an important um, impact and message in the NHL at the pro ranks? Um, really, Maritimers are um, ranked among probably some of the top players in the National Hockey League right now.
In the world, we are living in the golden age of maritime hockey. Now, we're not in the golden age of packing the Halifax Forum to see the Wolverines or the Canadians play or the Voyageurs play, but we are in the golden age of as far as talent production comes from the Maritimes. To think that Brad Marchand, Nate, and Sid are all from Halifax. 2 of them are from Cole Harbour. Those are 3 of the top 10 players in the world right now, and they're all from this little area. And we keep producing players. I mean, Graves from Yarmouth playing for Colorado. He kind of it seems like he came out of nowhere, but he didn't. But we're producing some fantastic players right now. I think it's a byproduct of the Halifax Mooseheads going to Halifax circa '94, and then Moncton coming on, and Cape Breton, and the rest of them, giving kids a chance. Because Craig, I'm sure you're as well aware of it as I am. Back in the day, the kids could go to any major junior league. Every town had a guy that could have made it. And if there was a kid from Nova Scotia on the bench or a kid from Ontario on the bench, you kept the kid from Ontario if they were close in talent. Now that kind of seems to have gone away, and kids from home are getting decent opportunities. And I just think it's pretty amazing what's happened in the Maritimes over the last 15, 20 years. I mean, when I was a kid, I worshipped Mike McPhee. I thought, I love the Montreal Canadiens. Thought the coolest thing in the world was there was a guy from Cape Breton, an hour and a half away from me, but that was a Montreal Canadian. Mike was a great player, but Mike was a grinder. Mike did it the hard way. But now we got Canadian players that are Nova Scotia Maritime players that are finesse guys. Um, that didn't happen. That wasn't always the case. I mean, Danny Grant, you could argue finesse guy. Um, Glenn Murray was a finesse guy, but now that we're producing these players, it's absolutely incredible to me.
Getting back to telling a tale and spinning that tale, when did you know that you're going to be a writer, Ken? And when did you know and realize that you were going to be a best-selling author?
Mm. Uh, didn't really know I was ever going to be a writer. I had no interest in the print side when I was in university, none whatsoever. Um, I guess what happened was when I always wanted to write a hockey book, right? I consumed hockey books. My brother and I always said we have to write a hockey book together. But when I got to Sportsnet, I had a platform, right? So I was a national broadcaster for the first time in my life. Before, I'd always worked for local stations like CTV Edmonton or 8 Channel Calgary. And when you're working at a CTV Edmonton, you're working long days. I mean, I'd be working 12-hour days in some cases on the weekends. So I never had the time and I never had the platform. When I got to Sportsnet, suddenly I had the platform because I was, a national anchor that supposedly has a bigger audience, which is true. But I also had time because when you become an anchor at a place like Sportsnet, you just anchor. You don't have to shoot your own stories. You don't have to produce your cast. You don't have to edit. So, I was only working 5 hours a night, so I had my days. I had time because I was in a strange city for me, Toronto. I couldn't golf as much as I want to because if you've ever tried to buy a golf membership in Toronto, well, good luck. I still can't afford one of those. So I kind of just stumbled into writing about hockey cards, and I talked with Ian Mendez. I had this idea for a book about calling up guys and talking to their old cards, and Ian said, "You need a literary agent." I said, "What is that?" He told me. He gave me the name of his guy, Jamie McLennan. What? I called the guy up. His name was Brian Wood. He said, "That's a great idea. You want to sign a deal?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I'll represent you." I said, "Okay." He called me back in a week. He said, "Well, I shopped it to 7 publishers. This is the one that's interested. You want to write the book? Oh, they'll pay you." Okay. So I had to write. So I am not Shakespeare by any means. And the nicest compliment I get from people is they say, "When I read your books, I can hear you saying it." So I read how I speak. And I always tell people that try to write for broadcast, say it and then write it. You'll see some young guy go on the air and he'll say, "The Montreal Canadiens are hosting the Boston Bruins tonight as they chase Boston for first in the division." I said, "Would you say that? Would you go up to a guy on the street and say, the Montreal Canadiens are hosting the Boston Bruins as they play for first in the division?" "No." I go, "Well, then why would you write it? Say, Montreal's playing Boston tonight. They're going for first in the division." So that's how I write for broadcast and in print. And somehow people made a connection with it because hockey cards, I think, are an easy thing to connect hockey fans over. And it hit the bestseller mark, and I did another one and another one and another one and another one. And some people call me an author. I call myself a guy who writes books. So that's kind of how it happened. And if you're wondering what happens with some of the extra books, I'll quickly show you. They're holding up this phone right now as we do this interview. So books are available.
We'll be right back with more speaking with Ken Reid here on Sports Inclusive. Don't go away. Joined by Maritime legend. We can say that now. Maritime legendary broadcaster Ken Reid. Ken, before the break, we were talking about your writing. Let's go way back. When was the first hockey game that you broadcasted, and really, when's the first time you went on camera?
All right. First off, thanks for the very liberal use of legendary. I appreciate that. Well, I'll take it. First game broadcast was during freshman year at university. It was a radio broadcast. Man, I got the Ernie McCracken hair going. First time ever on camera would have been in college, but first time doing a broadcast that was actually sent out on TV as far as television goes would have been in the old Access Cable 10 days when I did the play-by-play for the Dartmouth Olin Exports of the Maritime Junior League. And you're saying, no, it's the Halifax Olin Exports. Well, for a couple of years, Jimbo's team played in Dartmouth. So in the fall of '96, I started doing games from the Dartmouth Sportsplex on Tuesday nights. We would tape them, and then they would air on Saturday nights. So that was how I got my feet in the door professionally. And within 3 months of me volunteering as the play-by-play guy, Access Cable in Dartmouth started doing a community television news show that they had to hire 3 people for. So I was one of the 3 folks hired. So that was my first gig. I did that for 2 years and 2 months, and then I headed west. But man, the old Maritime League, man, it was a wild league. It was a blast. You had some heavyweight. Man, there were some sweet tilts in that league. So yeah, you get your feet wet when you do play by play of a bench clearing brawl where all what's breaking loose on the ice. So you learn quickly that way. But it was fun, and I still stay in contact with some of the guys that were on the team. Brad Hartland's a good buddy of mine. Timmy Boyce, who coaches the Halifax Max, we're always in touch on Twitter and stuff like that. So it's cool to see where the guys all ended up.
Did you ever think in those early days that you would have a national platform and be as popular and really, kind of a star on TV with regards to Rogers and the NHL and being on TV every night, Ken?
Well, again, thanks for the use of those nice words, Craig. I wanted to be. When I was a kid, I wanted to be the guy on Hockey Night in Canada. But I was realistic about it. I just wanted to get a job as a professional broadcaster, be it doing local sports in Calgary or Montreal or Edmonton. When I first started, I would bang on the door at ATV with no luck, MITV no luck, CBC Halifax no luck. So at that point, I wondered if I'd ever get to a place, like to be at a place like Sportsnet. It was a dream. I wanted to do it. I'd have these moments where I'd say, yeah, I can do it. But you always had your doubts. But you had to believe that you could, that it was a dream. And but when it became a reality, it was a little, at first, hard to accept. Like, I felt I belonged, but then I'd be going, oh my goodness, I just did a hit with Doug McLean and Don Cherry knows my name. But then you get used to it. But yeah, it's a dream gig. There's no doubt about that.
The impact that a highlight show can have. Do you ever think about that? And do you ever think about the impact that you're having in the sports world with regards to who's watching, who's tuning in, and all of those things?
To be honest, no, I don't think about it too much. When it's time to do the show, I just think let's have fun. And what I love about our show, Sportsnet Central weeknights, 11 Atlantic, is that we see the highlights when you guys see the highlights. So we call that in the business, as you know, reading them cold. So if I'm doing the highlights of the Pittsburgh and the New York Islanders game, and we're up at 9:30, and the Islanders in Pittsburgh are still playing, it comes off the printer and it's in a monitor right below me, and I'm seeing the highlights for the first time as you're seeing it at the same time, and I'm voicing them live. And when you hear me get excited, that's genuine excitement. And I think that comes a bit from my play-by-play days and when I started. I love hockey, man. I get excited by it. And if you hear me being excited, I'm excited. If you hear me and I sound bored, I'm bored. If you hear me and I sound ticked off, I'm ticked off. But as far as the impact of it goes, I never really think of it. But then I'll get maybe a text in the middle of a show, or I'll meet I'll give you an example. I was doing a game in Chicago, and Patrick Kane. I had to interview Patrick Kane between periods, and I was like, "Hi, Patrick, I'm Ken." He goes, "Oh yeah, I watched you and Ivanka when I'm up in Canada." And I was like, "What?" Like, you don't think that people are watching, but people are watching. So that's kind of cool.
Do you ever get nervous, and how do you balance that nervous energy when the red light comes on, Ken?
I'll be honest. When we do Sportsnet Central, I don't get nervous, and Ivanka finds it either annoying or funny because she gets nervous, and I don't. I don't know why, but I just don't. First time I did Hockey Night in Canada, oh yeah, like weeks leading up to it, because for me that is Hockey Night in Canada is the gold standard. I grew up worshiping the guys on Hockey Night in Canada, so to get to be on Hockey Night in Canada, the butterflies were there. But then they were eased. I mean, the first thing I had to do that night was interview one of the assistant coaches on the bench, and so I'm sitting there going, okay. The good thing was I knew the coach, but we had not seen each other that day, so I'm a little nervous. And I'm sitting on the bench. The players come out, and coach is about to come out, and my head's down. The coach starts walking up. The assistant coach, he's got the head down. He's all business. He looks up. He says, "Reader, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." So that broke. But at the end of the day, you have to realize when you're doing something like Hockey Night in Canada and you're coming on, you're saying, "Hey, we're here at the Bell Center." I used to say, "Here, I'm here at the Dartmouth Sportsplex," or I'd do live hits when I worked at CP24. And you have to think you do your best, but it's just another live hit. So I'm going to do the best job I can. It's something I've done before. I'm just doing it on a really cool show now. So just, you can do it. It's kind of that attitude.
The you can do it attitude. What's your biggest piece of advice for young kids wanting to get into the business of broadcasting and really the entire business of writing and telling stories? What's your best piece of advice, Ken?
Well, I've got a lot of pieces of advice. My best piece of advice, I guess it would be, as strange as it sounds for going into something like broadcasting, listen. Always listen to what people are saying and get their message. Um, Other pieces of advice I would give are be aggressive, do anything that any potential employer asks. Do not think you're going to get rich right away and or ever. Um, Only do it because you enjoy it. Don't do it because you want to be on the TV. Um, Follow your passion. So if you're into sports, do sports. If you're into politics, be politics. However, if you're asked to do city council, but you want to be your sports reporter, do city council because a story is a story. And enjoy the journey because the days when you're making hardly any money, and oftentimes they're the days that you get the best stories from. And always remember, as far as being a broadcaster goes when you're on TV and saying all the time, and the Montreal Canadiens, is thinking out loud, so think with your mouth closed. Ta-da. That's my advice.
Making the sacrifice. Do you ever think back to all the sacrifices that you've made and that your family has made to get you to this point, Ken?
Yeah, I think of the money it cost my mom and dad to put me through university, and I'm forever grateful for that. And I think of the support that they gave me when I went out, when I was making less per year than what it cost to send me to university per year. So I think about that. I think about how my dad would lend me his car to drive somewhere because I didn't want to take the bus that night. It was a snowstorm and I had to go to a game over in Dartmouth. I think of mom letting me live in her basement in Calgary when I moved out there when I was 24 and I was trying to get a job at A Channel Calgary. So yeah, I was lucky. I was very lucky to have two parents and stepdad and stepmom who were very supportive of me. And if it were not for them and for people like my old buddy Sandy Mackay, I don't know what I'd be doing, but I definitely wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So I think it's the same as a player signaling out an old coach, or maybe somebody who helped them with registration, or used to buy them fries after a game. There's a lot of people to thank along the way, and I'm forever grateful to a lot of people for that.
Everyone thinks it might be glamorous. What are the challenges that you face, especially having a young family, Ken?
Well, that's one thing I should have pointed out during the my broadcasting tips. You're going to work weekends. You're going to work weeknights. Your hours are going to stink. Embrace them. I work nights, so during the day I could sit around, but I decided I'll try this writing thing. You have to have an understanding partner. I'm very lucky. My wife used to work in the business, so she understands that if I get home at 1, it's not kind of cool to wake me up with the kids at 6:30. So she's cool that way, which is really fantastic. But yeah, the challenges are you're going to miss some things, but that just means to kind of cherish the time you do have together. I was saying to my wife the other night, the kids and I, we have movie night every night, the four of us, and I said, hopefully we can look back on this one day and remember what an adventure it was, and not how tough it was to all be stuck together, but how great it was to have a chance to just be together for however long this lasts.
Ken, last question for you. Your dad going back into the profession to help out, what does that mean to you personally? And
Wow. Yeah.
the impact that he's going to have in these uncertain times.
So that was cool. Dad retired about a year and a half, 2 years ago. So he'll go back to the clinic every couple months to fill in for a guy on vacation. But this time around, a couple of docs got quarantined because they went down south. So my dad's a medical doctor, so he's back going at her every day at a clinic in Dartmouth that he used to work at. So he's um, doing his best. So I just kind of sent out a tweet to thank him, to thank all our medical professionals, and I put a picture of Dad and Peter and I out there golfing, Peter, my brother, and the tweet kind of took off, and I had calls from a reporter in New York and all kinds of stuff. So I'm very grateful to not only my dad, but for everybody out there on the front lines who's doing this. And Dad's one of those guys, he's not afraid of picking up anything. It is what it is, and it's part of the deal. So it kind of comes with the territory. So having a dad who's known throughout Nova Scotia and Pictou County and Halifax as Dr. Dan is a pretty awesome thing. And I always laugh because when I go back to Halifax, I'm still Dr. Dan's boy. Or I go back to Pictou, I'm still Dr. Dan's boy. People look, oh my goodness, that's the guy from Sportsnet. They'll say that's Dr. Reid's kid. So thanks, Dad, and thanks to all the doctors and nurses and everyone else in the medical profession out there. It's crazy times, that's for sure.
Well, it's crazy to have the opportunity to talk with you on Sports Inclusive, Ken. Thank you so much, and make sure, folks, that you're following Ken on all the social media platforms to really know what's coming next, and some great new projects coming your way from Ken Reid. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Craig. Yeah, people can follow me on Twitter at SNKenReid, on Instagram at Ken Reid Sportsnet, and of course on Sportsnet Central as soon as we get back. And Craig, if you're wondering why I had the bad salad today with the Ernie McCracken thing going and the hair everywhere, it's because I was wearing the Gretzky bucket all day before we came on.
Thanks again, Ken. Take care.